Hey guys, welcome back. This is the second in a two-part series I'm doing on my outdoor workshop shed. In this video, I'm going to be outlining my process on both the doors that I built. First, I'm going to be laying down some 2x4s to build the frame for one of the doors and mark everything out and then cut it using my circular saw. Once I have all the 2x4s cut to size, I can begin to attach them to one another. And to attach the top and bottom to the studs, I just use some nails. Now I can pick up the door frame and test it for fit. And then I can measure out the location of the dowels that I'll be installing in order to provide a pivot point to the door. And once the location has been marked out, I can beef up the top side of the door frame. This will provide me extra support for drilling through with a Forstner bit. I drilled these holes to the exact diameter of the dowel that I had, and this will give me a nice snug fit for the dowel to fit into. The main motivation that I had for designing an overhanging door was to provide me some shade in the summertime as well as some minimal protection from the elements. On the receiving end on the shed framing, I made the holes a little bit oversized, and this gives some wiggle room for the dowels to pivot. Now once those holes are drilled out, I can put the door frame in place and hammer the dowels straight through into the framing on the shed. On the bottom of the door, I placed a shim, and this will help provide a little bit of a gap so that the door does not scrape against the floor of the plywood. And once those dowels are hammered into place, the door is now installed. And now moving on to the right-hand door, this door pivots sideways versus up and down. And this door initially is built the same way as the left-hand door. The only difference being is I'm going to be installing some angled bracing on each of the corners. And to do this, I'm first going to make sure that the door is on a flat level ground, install this angled bracing, and then install the plywood on top of that. To install the bracing, all I did was pre-drill some holes and then I screwed them all together. In combination of these angled brackets and the plywood on top of it, it'll help prevent any sag in the door. In testing to make sure that this framing fit, I saw that there was a little bit of a tight squeeze on one of the corners, so I decided to cut it off. And after that one corner is cut off, the door fits in there nicely. And now I can mark out the plywood sheet that's going to go on top of each of the doors and cut them to size, and can install them using some 1.5 inch exterior screws. In order to attach the right-hand door, I had to install some plywood on the right post. And this beefed up that front post enough so that the door and the post will be flush with one another. So I shimmed it up to give it some clearance off the bottom sheet of plywood, and then I used some pieces of 2x4 attached to the interior studs, and that gave me almost a perfectly flush door on the exterior. And with the door in its final resting place, I can install the 3 hinges. Now I put my screws on the outside of the building just for ease. In order to prevent somebody from going up and unscrewing your door, you can either drill out the screw heads, or what we can do is you get some JB weld and fill that into little screw slots. Now I'm cutting out the plywood sheet for the left-hand door. And once that's in place, I can simply pin that in real quick. And then I'll go through with some screws. To lock this left-hand overhead door down, I just took a Forstner bit that's a little bit oversized from my dowel, and I went through the bottom 2x4 in the door frame into the plywood. And when this is all lined up, you can close that door, drop in the dowel, and then the door is locked. Now Bailey got a little bit scared of the air compressor, so I decided to give her my earmuffs. Now that the two doors are installed, I can work on the contraption that's going to lock this overhanging door up. Here I'm trying to determine if it would be better to put this bracing just below the studs on the door or inside the studs on the door. And I determined it would be better if I did the bracing just below the studs so that they're in line. I can cut some little 2x4s and screw those onto the door where I think that the first hinge will go. Now using a mason jar cap, I was able to capture a pretty good circle onto the edge of the 2x4s. This mason jar cap is 3.5 inches, which is the exact size that you need for a 2x4. Finding the center line is pretty easy. You just go corner to opposite corner on each side, and it'll give you a nice X. Then I can drill through this with another Forstner bit. And these will be oversized to the dowels so that the dowels will slide freely through them. And now I can work on an installation of the dowels into the 2x4. And these holes that I drilled were a tight fit, so the dowels will not move. Now once the dowels are installed onto the bracing, I can put them onto the door frame and line them up, and this will give me a better idea of where I need to drill holes for the opposing dowels. Now I can line it up, and using a pencil I can mark out where to cut and use a jigsaw to cut a nice little groove so that when it latches closed it's going to slide and drop right into place. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. Now I'm installing these little square caps here to lock the arms in place when everything's moving around. This isn't pretty, and you could probably do circles and it'll be a lot better, but this works very well. Now I'm going to use a multi-tool to cut a little slot into my framing and install a 2x4 with a dowel in it. I can use my first cut bracing arm to trace out the second, and then cut that out using a jigsaw as well. I realized that I had to cut a little groove into each of the 2x4s so that it would fit when the door is closed. And it's kind of hard to explain why, you'll just have to see what I mean. Once that little groove is in there, it's going to close to the middle part of the 2x4, and you'll see it sliding here in a second.
It's done!
Alright, in the left-hand corner you can see my original design and how much I deviated from it. And you'll find that with any project you go along and you realize that your original design might not be practical. So I had to make changes along the way. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.